Hello and welcome to Castar Reviews. Today I'm looking at the Street Fighter Alpha sub-series of games. I don't know why Capcom ultimately decided to go back to fill in the blanks between Street Fighter and Street Fighter 2, but I'm happy that they did. Since the previous two games were severely lacking in terms of story, the Alpha series is here to talk about how some recurring faces got their start, and what happened in the aftermath of Sagat's World Martial Arts Tournament. In Japan, these games are known as Street Fighter Zero, which further cements the sub-series' prequel status. Capcom also used the anime-inspired art style that they utilized in Darkstalkers and their Marvel fighting games. Speaking of, these character sprites would get a lot of mileage from Capcom, with them being used for their cameos in the Capcom Vs. series. In addition to the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, you can also play all three Alpha games in the Street Fighter Alpha Anthology for PS2. And Street Fighter Alpha 3 specifically got some other updates that I'll discuss more in the gameplay section. So without further ado, let's see how well the Street Fighter Alpha series builds on the massive success of its predecessor. Right off the bat, Street Fighter Alpha 1 is non-canon, so I'm only going to be going into the plots of Alpha 2 and Alpha 3. Following on from Street Fighter 1, we see a few returning characters in Birdie, Adon, and Gen, who didn't make the jump to Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter Alpha 2 doesn't center around a worldwide fighting tournament like the previous games, and is therefore a more character-driven narrative. We get more info on Ryu and Ken's rivalry, Sagat's quest for vengeance, and his affiliation with M.Bison and Shadaloo. I think it's a nice touch to find out that Ryu's iconic red headband is actually a gift from Ken. There's also more backstory given to Charlie Nash, Guile's war buddy who was killed by M.Bison. We also find out that Ryu has some dark power lurking inside him that Akuma wants to embrace, all Star Wars-like. Lastly, there's Sakura, who's Ryu's #1 fan and teaches herself how to throw fireballs, and Dan Hibiki, a Joe character that is a direct shot at SNK's Ryo Sakazaki from the Art of Fighting series. And Rose, who is the physical embodiment of Bison's positive energy, don't ask. The funniest part about Dan Hibiki, though, is that he has almost the exact same moveset as Ryo, but he's the worst character in the game. But still, even the fucking joke character has a backstory, with Sagat having killed Dan's father. I haven't even touched Alpha 3 yet, and this is the most connected Street Fighter story ever. Unlike Street Fighter 2, this makes the franchise feel like its own world, where characters interact with each other and aren't so one-dimensional. Alpha 3 adds the rest of the World Warriors from Street Fighter 2, except for Guile, T-Hawk, DJ, and Fei Long. They show up in later releases. As far as new characters are concerned, we are introduced to the Shadaloo dolls, who are brainwashed girls named after months who serve as potential bodies for M.Bison if/when he dies. You can actually play as two of them, Julie and Junie. Cammy is also shown to be one of these dolls, but she forgoes the naming scheme. It's very strange. Why would Bison want to inhabit the body of a cute girl after he dies? Also, he tells Cammy she's a clone of him, to which I say, I really don't see it. Aren't clones supposed to be more, alike? Joining Cammy in the Blonde Street Fighter Club is Karen Kanzuki, a rich girl rival to Sakura, and Rainbow Mika, a wrestler who idolizes Zangief. Other than some more character-based interactions, there isn't too much story in Alpha 3 other than that Bison was killed and Shadaloo's base was blown up by Charlie and Chun-Li. But, in a weird twist of bullshit difficulty, if you do not beat Bison on your first try at the end of the game, you get the bad ending, where it turns out that statue in Sagat's stage controls an orbital laser that fires at the Earth. I mean, seriously, what the fuck? While I can appreciate the greater story focus, it's not the only thing that was improved upon. Are these games even using the same arcade board? Well, yeah, the entire Alpha series utilizes the CPS2 board, but it looks night and day compared to Street Fighter 2. The sprite quality is excellent, and the backgrounds are really interesting with hidden secrets like character cameos. I love the animations in these games as well. Some Street Fighter 2 attacks look sorta stiff, but in the Alpha series, all attacks look and feel kinetic and powerful. The character design is something I'm a bit torn on. If we're going with distinctly younger versions of Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, and Cammy, why not give every character a redesign like that? They don't have to be as drastic as Ken growing his hair out or Chun-Li ditching her Chi-Pow, but when 75% of the roster looks the same, it doesn't feel too much like a prequel game. Also, what happened to Bison? He looks fucking huge! Has he been doing steroids? He is very different from the relatively skinny Bison we'll see in the future. On that subject, I like a lot of these redrawn sprites. Even the characters who didn't change their designs look so much better in this art style. The music is also pretty great. Most of the character themes have been changed from Street Fighter 2, so it's a nice touch that demonstrates how this game takes place a bit before the characters gain their iconic Super Turbo themes. The sound effects are just as punchy as before, and the screen flash when you win a round with a super combo is very satisfying. When compared to Street Fighters 1 and 2, the Street Fighter Alpha series is light years beyond its presentation. Not saying the previous iterations look terrible, but the Alpha series is just that much better. All three Street Fighter Alpha games built upon the formula that was set with Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Compared to its predecessor, the Alpha games are much more frantic and fast-paced. In Alpha 1 you can do chain combos, which is a sequence of buttons going from light to heavy. The amount of super meter built up carries over between rounds now, and you can now perform different types of super attacks depending on the buttons you hold during the command input. You can also use the super meter for an alpha counter, which costs a third of your bar and interrupts any attack while you're blocking. And finally, each character gets new moves and a new super combo. For example, Ryu can now perform the Shinku Tatsumaki Senpu Kyaku, Ken has the Shin Ryuken, and Chun-Li is given the Kikosho. Street Fighter Alpha 2 adds Gan, Relento from Final Fight, Dalsum, Zangief, and Sakura. Also, finally, Akuma can be selected without putting in a special code, but he's definitely not as broken as he was in Super Turbo, let me tell you. Chain combos are gone, but now you can perform custom combos when your meter's filled. The super meter acts like a timer, and you can perform whatever moves you want with a little after image effect until you either get hit, drop the combo, or the timer runs out. A fun thing about arcade mode in these two games is that there isn't a singular final boss. Each fighter has a story-based final battle, which incentivizes playing through the game with each character. Lastly, Street Fighter Alpha 3 began the trend in Capcom fighting games of player choice, whether it be selectable assists in Marvel vs. Capcom, selectable super arts in Street Fighter 3, and the groove system of Capcom vs. SNK 2. If you're playing a Capcom fighting game, there is some element that you can choose to better fit your playstyle. In Alpha 3 you have different isms that can change your super meter. You can pick X-ism, which is more akin to the Super Turbo meter system, old school Chun-Li included. The standard meter system is A-ism, which is the 3-tiered meter system that Alpha fans are used to. And lastly, you can pick V-ism, where you can't do super combos, but this is the only way to do custom combos. By the way, custom combos are insane in this game, because your after image copies your attacks a few frames after you do them, which can lead to some serious mix-up potential where your opponent has no idea where to block. I love these options, and they add new ways to use characters and more depth to gameplay. Not only that, but A-ism improves the way you can perform super combos, with the level of super tied to the strength of the button as opposed to holding multiple. It was very annoying trying to hold all 3 punches or kicks at the same time to do a level 3 super in Alpha 2, so this brings a more reliable method of doing those as well as the full meter exclusive supers. The gameplay has gotten a bit more complex, but if you start off playing Street Fighter 2 and work your way up, the build-up of mechanics seems more gradual. Personally, I prefer Alpha 3 over Alpha 2 and Alpha 1, since it has more characters to use, different ways to play the game, and a very cool UI. But actually, the arcade release isn't even the most amount of characters in Street Fighter Alpha 3. Of course, Julie, Junie, and Balrog are hidden, but you can play as the rest of the Street Fighter 2 cast, Eagle from Street Fighter 1, Evil Ryu, Shin Akuma, Maki from Final Fight 2, and Yoon from Street Fighter 3 if you get the portable versions. For reasons that are beyond my comprehension, the most feature-rich versions of Street Fighter Alpha 3 are on the Game Boy Advance and PSP. For reasons that are even further beyond my comprehension, these versions are not in the 30th anniversary collection. I get the whole craze about arcade perfect ports, but this is to the point where features that exist are not being put into what should be a definitive collection of the arcade Street Fighter games. I will most likely complain more about this in the next video, but here's a preview of my thoughts on the collection. Back to the Alpha games themselves, all 3 add things to the Street Fighter series that will be used in future games, such as having multiple super combos, tiered super meters, and the option to play the game how you want to. The Street Fighter Alpha series did a ton for the franchise, and at this point Capcom's fighting games are riding high with this game, Darkstalkers, and the Marvel fighting games. Even with all the hype, Capcom decided to go in a completely different direction with the next iteration of the franchise. Street Fighter 3 is set far after Street Fighter 2 with a bunch of new faces. Thank you for watching this episode of Castar Reviews. Subscribe for more content from me and follow me on Twitter for production updates. See you soon.